Hello everybody, welcome back to NIOS Made Easy. Today we are doing another board question paper. This is from Business Studies. This paper was given in February 2021. This is how the question paper is split up. We have 10 1-mark questions which will total up to 10 marks. Then we have 5 3-mark questions that will be 15 marks. Then we have 5 4-mark questions which will total up to 20 marks. Then we have 5 5-mark questions that will total up to 25 marks. And then we have 5 6-mark questions that will total up to 30 marks. This is a 100 marks paper and it is for 3 hours. Let's get started with the questions. This is the first question. The head of the joint Hindu family business is known as? The head of the joint Hindu family business is known as a Karta. Next question. Which of the following is not a function of warehouses? Option A, risk bearing. Option B, transport facility to every customer. Option C, financing. And option D, protection of goods. Options A, C and D are functions of warehouses. So the correct option is B, that is transport facility to every customer is not a function of a warehouse. The next question. Which of the following is an example of visual communication? Option A, a person is reading a letter. Option B, a person is saluting the national flag. Option C, the peon is ringing bell in the school. Option D, a traffic policeman showing the stop sign. The correct answer is option D, a traffic policeman showing the stop sign. Question 4. What is the full form of BPO? The correct full form of BPO is Business Process Outsourcing, which is option B. The next question. To sell ready-made garments for children, men, women, etc. is an example of? It is an example of a single line store. Question 6. Which of the following is a tool of sales promotion? Giving free samples, option D, is a tool for sales promotion. This is from chapter 16, Sales Promotion and Personal Selling. We can see that the answer is here. Please pause the video and read the paragraph. This paragraph speaks of how sales promotions happen. And here they say that all the incentives offered by manufacturers are to increase the sale of their goods. And these incentives can be in the form of free samples. So that's the correct answer. Question number 7. In which year Consumer Protection Act was enforced? The Consumer Protection Act was enforced in the year 1986. So that is option C. The next question. Consumer courts do not include? The consumer courts do not include the Supreme Court. So the correct answer is D, Supreme Court. Question number 9. Career planning includes starting your own business, joining a job, making adjustments with the career, thinking suitably about positive and negative aspects of a career. The correct option is option D, that is thinking suitably about the positive and negative aspects of a career. This is the last multiple choice question. Which of the following is a function of an entrepreneur? Innovation, risk bearing, growth and development. The last option is all of the above. So the answer is all of the above. Moving on to the 3-mark questions. Differentiate between economic and non-economic activities on the basis of purpose, outcome and expectation. This is from the chapter 1, Nature and Scope of Business. This is a pretty straightforward question. The answer to this question is in the form of a table given in this chapter. The difference between economic and non-economic activities. The first difference is based on the purpose. The main purpose of economic activities is to earn. So earning is the main motive. Whereas for non-economic activities, the main purpose is social and psychological motives. That is, it is done for self-satisfaction. The next option is outcome. The outcome of an economic activity will lead to the creation of wealth and assets. Whereas the outcome of a non-economic activity will lead to satisfaction and happiness. The third basis is expectation. People expect profits or money as an income from economic activities. Whereas for non-economic activities, people do not expect any profits or any money as an income. These were the differences between economic activities and non-economic activities based on the purpose, the outcome and the expectation. Question number 12, the next question. State 3 limitations of a joint stock company. This is from chapter 4, that is cooperative societies and joint stock companies. This is again a straightforward question and the answer is in the form of bullet points already. There are 5 limitations given here. For this question, we can write any 3 of them. The first limitation is difficulty of formation. It's very difficult and also very expensive to form a company. There is a lot of documentation that has to be prepared and it has to be filed with the registrar of companies. So the process of formation is quite difficult for a joint stock company. The next limitation is excessive government control. A joint stock company has to go through elaborate statutory regulations for its day-to-day operations. They'll have to prepare periodical reports, they have to undergo audits, and they have to publish all their accounts. All these are mandatory functions. So there is excessive government control for a joint stock company. The third limitation, oligarchic management. The management of a company is usually supposed to be democratic, but in reality or in practice, the company becomes oligarchic in its management. Oligarchic means it is managed by only a few people of the company. So these were the limitations of a joint stock company. For a 3-mark question, it is not just sufficient if you write the headings like this, that is difficulty of formation, excessive government control or oligarchic management. Please write at least 1 line following this and it will ensure that you will get 3 marks fully. The next question, question 13. Explain the elements of the communication process in brief. This is again a direct question for which the answer is available like this in the textbook. It is a good idea that for this question you write this figure as well. The communication process includes the following 4 elements. The first is the sender, who is sending the message, and he is also known as the source. Then we have the receiver. The receiver is the person who is receiving this message. Then we have the actual message itself, which is the subject matter of the communication. It can include facts, ideas, feelings or thoughts. Then finally we have the feedback. Feedback is the receiver's response or the reaction or the reply to the message, which has been directed towards the sender. So this is a cyclic process. Please try to include this diagram in your answer because the diagram is self-explanatory. What is meant by auction sale? This is from the chapter 12, purchase and sale. An auction sale refers to the sale of certain goods openly on a specific date and time so that people may bid for these goods. The goods are sold to the highest bidder. Usually in an auction sale, the goods are displayed and there is a reserve price below which the goods are not to be sold. So the reserve price is fixed for all the goods. It is fixed by the seller and sometimes it may be made known to the public or sometimes it may be kept as a secret. Sometimes during an auction sale, there is an upset price which is also the base price at which the bidding starts. Sometimes the goods may be sold at the minimum price. However, price is regarded as the minimum price and below this price the goods are not going to be sold. A bid by an intending purchaser is considered as an offer if it is the highest bid and it is accepted. Once it is accepted, the bidder cannot go back and he must pay the price and he has to purchase it. Question number 15. Define a consumer. This is from chapter 17, Rights and Responsibilities of Consumers. The definition to this question is relatively small, assuming that it is a 3-mark question. So try to expand it by writing some related points for this question. Consumer is a person who buys goods and services to be used or consumed by himself or herself or by someone else on behalf of the buyer. Goods may include both consumable items and durable consumer goods, while services paid for may include transport, electricity, film shows, etc. A consumer may be defined as anybody who chooses goods and services he will spend money to obtain them and he will use them to satisfy his or her needs. Question number 16. Explain any two characteristics of business. This is from the first chapter, Nature and Scope of Business. There are some essential characteristics of businesses. There are 5 listed out here, but the question is asking us to explain any two characteristics. So the first one, it deals in goods and services. That is, people in business are engaged in the production and distribution of goods and services. The next one, sale or exchange of goods or services. In a business, the goods and services produced or purchased must be exchanged for money or for goods between buyers and sellers. Without the sale or exchange of goods, the activities cannot be treated as business. Regular exchange of goods and services. The production of buying or selling of activities has to be carried on a regular basis. An isolated transaction of buying or selling will not be considered as a business. These are some of the characteristics of a business. The next question. Explain any 4 functions of a warehouse. This is from chapter 6, Warehousing. Some of the functions of a warehouse are as below. The first function is storage of goods. The basic function of warehouses is to store large stock of goods. These goods are stored from the time of their production or purchase till their consumption or use. The second function is protection of goods. A warehouse provides protection to goods from the loss or damage due to heat, dust, wind, moisture, etc. It makes special preventive arrangements for different products according to their nature. It cuts down on the losses due to spoilage and wastage during storage. So for different goods, there are arrangements that are already done in order to prevent them from getting spoiled, and this depends on the goods that are stored. And the losses here are cut down because spoilage or wastage during storage is avoided. The next point is risk bearing. Warehouses take over the risks for the storage of goods. Once the goods are handed over to the warehouse keeper for storage, the responsibility of these goods passes on to the warehouse keeper. Thus, any risk of loss or damage to these goods is borne by the warehouse keeper. The next function is financing. When goods are deposited in a warehouse, the depositor will get a receipt which also acts as a proof for the deposit of these goods. The warehouses can issue a document in favor of the owner of these goods, which is called as the warehouse keeper's warrant. Question number 18. What is ATM? How does it help the customers of the bank? ATM stands for Automated Teller Machine. It is a machine that is kept at a bank branch or any other location, and it helps the customer to perform basic banking activities like checking balance, checking the account balance, withdrawing money, or transferring funds. This can all be done even when the bank is closed. By using this, customers can deposit or withdraw money from their account at any time. And to enable the customers to use the ATM, the banks issue an ATM card to all its depositors, which will help the easy withdrawal of money from their accounts. This card can be used for withdrawing money from the savings account or the current bank account, and it can be used on the ATM machine. This card is a magnetic card and it will operate using a secret number. It is one of the convenient ways to withdraw money. The next question. Differentiate between departmental store and super bazaar. This is from chapter 14, Retail Trade. This is again a straightforward question, and this table is already available in the textbook. We are differentiating between the departmental stores and super bazaars on the basis of ownership. Departmental stores are owned by private individuals. Super bazaars are owned by cooperative societies. On the basis of facilities, certain facilities like restaurant, toilets, telephones, etc. are available to customers in a departmental store, whereas in a super bazaar, there are no such facilities available to their customers. On the basis of the prices of goods, in departmental stores, the prices of goods are generally higher than the market rate. In a super bazaar, goods are sold at a cheaper rate when compared to departmental stores. Lastly, departmental stores sell goods on a credit basis, whereas in a super bazaar, sales are made only on cash basis. So there is no credit available in super bazaars. These were the differences between departmental stores and super bazaars on the basis of ownership, facilities available, the prices of goods, and the availability of credit. Moving on to the next question, question 20. Describe any 4 qualities of a successful entrepreneur. This is from chapter 20, Entrepreneurship. Some of the qualities of a successful entrepreneur are as below. The first is initiative. He or she should be able to initiate action and take advantage of the opportunity. Once an opportunity is missed, it is not going to come back again. Therefore, initiative on the part of the entrepreneur is a must. The next quality is willingness to assume risk. In any business, there is risk. So an entrepreneur should always be ready to take risks to run a business and be successful. The next quality is to be able to learn from experience. An entrepreneur may commit mistakes, but however, once a mistake has been committed, it should not be repeated again, as this will lead to losses. So the entrepreneur must learn from his mistakes and not repeat it again. So it is an important quality to be able to learn from experience and mistakes. Finally, another quality is motivation. Motivation is a key to success. It is the interest in the work we do, and it comes through motivation. And this is one of the essential qualities of a successful entrepreneur. Question number 21. What is e-commerce? Discuss any 4 advantages of e-commerce. This is from chapter 2, Industry and Commerce. E-commerce or electronic commerce is a subset of e-business. It is purchasing, selling and exchanging goods and services over computer networks. So the buying and selling happens through the internet, through which transactions and the sale is performed, and it all happens electronically. Some of the advantages of e-commerce are as below. With the help of a well-developed computer networking system, business units can operate at a national as well as at a global level. So we have a wider choice of products and services, and the businessmen also get a wider market to showcase their products and services. The second advantage is improved customer service. Suppliers of goods and services can offer a wide range of services to customers. This can happen before as well as after the sale, such as information about products, guidance on how to use the products, responding to customers' queries about the quality and usefulness of the products, etc. Quick response to customer needs. In an e-commerce business transaction, it takes far less time compared to the normal process of buying and selling. This is because the producers cut short the distribution channel and supply products and services directly to consumers. The distributors who are in between the producers and the consumers are avoided in this case. The next advantage, cost saving and price reduction. There is substantial cost saving in business transactions conducted through e-commerce. There is no need to display goods in showrooms or keep large stock in the godowns. Thus, the cost of operation naturally comes down. So the consumers may get good deals at a lower rate. Question number 22. State 5 features of a partnership form of a business organization. This is from chapter 3, Sole Proprietorship, Partnership and Hindu Undivided Family. This is a 5-mark question. The various features of this form of a business organization are, it can have 2 or more members. At least 2 or more members are required to start a partnership business, but the number of members should not exceed 10 in case of a banking business and 20 in case of other businesses. Agreement. Whenever you think of joining hands with others to start a partnership business, first of all, there must be an agreement between all of them. The agreement will contain details like the amount of capital contributed by each partner, profit loss ratio, etc. You'll have to do a lawful business. The partners should always join hands to carry on any kinds of lawful business. Indulging in smuggling, black marketing, etc. cannot be called as a partnership business in the eye of law. Sharing of profits. The main objective of every partnership firm is to share the profits of the business amongst the partners and in the agreed proportions. In the absence of any agreement of profit sharing, it should be shared equally amongst the partners. The last feature is unlimited liability. Just like the sole proprietor, the liability of partners is also unlimited. It means that if the assets of the firm are insufficient to meet the liabilities, then the personal properties of the partners, if any, will also be utilized to meet the firm's liabilities. So these were the features of a partnership form of a business organization. Question number 23. Describe the procedure of opening a savings bank account in a bank. To open a savings bank account in a commercial bank, you should first decide what amount of money would you like to deposit. Having understood all the details, you will get the application form for opening the savings bank account. The first step is to fill up the form. The application form has to be filled up. You'll give necessary details like name of the person, that is the applicant who has to open the account, his occupation, residential address, specimen signature of the applicant, and other details like name, address, account number, and the signature of the person who is actually introducing this applicant. As mentioned in the previous point, the bank needs a proper introduction. Every bank will require a person who is known to the bank to introduce the applicant. It may be convenient to be introduced by a person who is already having an account in that bank. Some banks may also accept the attested copy of the passport or the driving license of the applicant. The next one is the specimen signature. The applicant has to put his or her specimen signature at the blank space provided on the application form. In addition to this, specimen signature should also be put separately on a card on which a photograph of the applicant will be pasted along with his or her name and the account number. After all these steps have been taken, if the officer concerned is satisfied that this application form is in order, money will be deposited at the cash counter after filling a printed pay-in slip. The next question, question 24. What is personal selling? State any 3 elements of personal selling. This is from chapter 16. Sale, promotion and personal selling. Personal selling refers to the presentation of goods and services and convincing and persuading potential customers to buy a product or a service. Some of the elements of personal selling are as below. The first is face-to-face interaction. Personal selling involves a salesman having a face-to-face interaction with the prospective buyers. The next element is persuasion. Personal selling requires persuasion on the part of the seller to the prospective customers to buy a product. So a salesperson must have the ability to convince the customers so that an interest may be created in the minds of the customers to use that product, which will eventually lead to them buying the product as well. Flexibility. The approach of personal selling is always flexible. The salesperson will explain the features and the benefits of the product, sometimes also gives a demonstration of the product on how to use the product, answers all the questions related to the product to the customers. Looking at the situation and the interest shown by the customers, the approach taken by the salesperson is decided instantly. The next question, question number 25. What do you mean by consumerism? Explain any 2 responsibilities of a consumer. Consumerism refers to a movement by consumers to ensure fair and honest, that is ethical practices on the part of manufacturers, traders, dealers, and service providers in relation to consumers. The movement may be regarded as an attempt by an individual consumer activist and consumer associations for creating consumer awareness about malpractices in the market and finding ways and means in which they can protect their interests. Some of the responsibilities of the consumer can be the following. The first one is self-help. It is always desirable that a consumer should not depend on the seller or any other person for information and choice as far as possible. As a consumer, you are expected to act in a responsible manner to protect yourself from being cheated or deceived. An informed customer will always take care of his or her interest before anybody else. So this is your responsibility towards self-help. The next is to maintain proof of transactions. One important responsibility of every consumer is the proof of purchase or the documents relating to the purchase of durable goods that should be invariably obtained from the seller, and it has to be preserved. For example, it is very important to get a cash memo on the purchase of goods. Similarly, consumer durable goods like TVs, refrigerator, etc., they also carry warranty or guarantee cards, which are again issued by the dealers. These cards entitle you to get the service of for repairs and replacement of parts, that to free of cost during a certain period after the purchase. Question number 26. What are the activities undertaken by a consumer cooperative society? Explain any 4 features of cooperative societies. This is from chapter 4, Cooperative Societies and Joint Stock Companies. The consumers' cooperative societies are formed to protect the interest of general customers by making consumer goods available at a reasonable price. They purchase goods directly from producers and eliminate middlemen in the process of distribution. Some examples like Kendriya Bhandar, Apna Bazaar and Super Bazaar, these are examples of consumer cooperative societies. The features of cooperative societies are as below. The first is it is a voluntary association. A cooperative society is a voluntary association. A member within this association can join the society as and when he likes, and he can continue for as long as he likes, and you can leave the society at will. It's an open membership. The membership of a cooperative society is open to all those who have a common interest. Membership is not restricted on the basis of caste, sex, color, religion, etc., but it may be limited to the employees of a particular organization. The next feature is the source of finance. The capital of a cooperative society is raised from among its members in the form of a share capital. It can easily raise loans and secure grants from the governments after registration. Lastly, voting power is a feature where each member has one vote, irrespective of the number of shares held by him or her. These were some of the features of a cooperative society. The next question, this is a 6-mark question. Explain any 4 saving schemes operated through the post office. This is from chapter 8, Postal and Courier Services. The first scheme is the post office savings bank account. So this is a type of account where we can deposit our savings in post offices and withdraw it whenever required. The minimum amount required to open an account is 50 rupees and a maximum of 1 lakh rupees can be put into the account if this is an individual account. If the account is jointly operated, the maximum limit for the deposit is 2 lakhs. Money can be withdrawn using withdrawal slips or checks. Post office pays an interest on our deposits, which is totally exempted from income tax. The next is the 5-year post office recurring deposit scheme. A recurring deposit account can be opened with a minimum of 10 rupees and there is no maximum limit to it. The deposit has to be made every month for a period of 5 years. After 1 year, 50% of the deposit can be withdrawn. It can be withdrawn only once during the 5-year period. There is no restriction to open more than one recurring deposit account in the name of a single individual. On maturity, a 10 rupee deposit will fetch you 728 rupees and this account can be continued for another 5 years on a year-on-year basis. The next is post office time deposit account. So this is an account which can be opened with a minimum balance of 200 rupees and there is no maximum limit for deposit. The depositor can make a deposit as a lump sum and after that amount matures, after the expiry of that fixed period, it can be withdrawn. The fixed period can be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years or 5 years. This account can be also opened by a trust. The amount deposited will earn an interest and it is exempted from income tax. The Post Office Monthly Income Scheme. This is a scheme under which a fixed sum of money can be deposited for 6 years and the depositors will get an interest every month. A minimum amount of 1,500 rupees up to a maximum amount of 4.5 lakh rupees can be deposited, and in case it is a joint account, 9 lakh rupees can be deposited. In addition to the interest, the deposit amount also earns a bonus at the rate of 5%, which is payable to you on maturity. Both income as well as the bonus is exempted from income tax. This account is suitable for retired employees or anybody who wants a regular income like a pension or a salary. Question number 28. State any 6 differences between wholesalers and retailers. This is a straightforward question. This is from chapter 13, that is channels of distribution, and this table is available on page 200. Wholesalers buy goods in large quantities, whereas retailers buy goods in small quantities. Wholesalers buy goods directly from the producers, while retailers buy goods from the wholesalers. Wholesalers deal with limited variety of goods, whereas retailers deal with a wide variety of products or goods. Wholesalers require more capital to start and run their business, while retailers require less capital to start and run their business. Wholesalers sell goods and the purpose is resale, whereas retailers sell goods for consumption to the general public. Wholesalers do not have any direct contact with consumers, whereas retailers maintain direct contact with consumers. No special attention is given to the decoration of the shop in case of the wholesalers, whereas for retailers, in order to attract attention, retailers give more attention to the decoration of the shop. These were some of the differences between wholesalers and retailers. Question number 29. Discuss any 4 of the problems faced by consumers in their daily life. This is from chapter 18, that is consumer protection. Some of the problems faced by the consumers are as below. First is adulteration. Adulteration is adding something inferior to the products being sold. This is a practice we come across in our daily lives in case of cereals, spices, tea, edible oil, etc. For example, black pepper is known to be adulterated with dry papaya seeds. Petrol is normally mixed with kerosene oil. Ghee or butter is mixed with vanaspati. The inferior materials sometimes used to adulterate can also be injurious to health. The next problem that the consumers face is use of false weights and measures. This is a malpractice, and some traders adopt this practice while selling their goods to make more profit. For goods that are sold by weight, like vegetables, cereals, pulses, sugar, etc., and goods that are sold by measuring, like textiles, fabric, etc., these are sometimes found to be less than the actual weight or the actual length. False weights are used. False measuring tapes or sticks are used which have false markings on them, and they're used for the purpose of measuring or weighing, and in turn the buyers get cheated. Sometimes packaged goods or sealed containers like tins also contain less quantities than what is actually mentioned on the packing. Selling of duplicate goods. Goods that indicate a mark which is shown is of superior quality than what it actually is. For example, goods are locally made, but they are sold at higher prices as imported items, and they are expected to be of superior quality. Certain goods like washing soap, like detergent powders, tube lights, etc., they carry well-known brand names, although they are made by others and the quality is not so good. Hoarding and black marketing is another problem that the consumer most often faces. When an essential commodity is not available in the open market and the stocks are intentionally held back by dealers, it is called as hoarding. The purpose is to create an artificial scarcity and push up the prices. Black market is a practice of selling hoarded goods, and It is sold secretly at higher prices. The last question, question 30. What are the factors you would like to consider if you start a small enterprise to produce wristwatch? Explain in brief any 4 such factors. So this is a question where we'll have to write factors that help us start a business enterprise. This is from chapter 20, that is entrepreneurship. The first factor is to arrange the finance. The entrepreneur has to analyze and find out the amount of money he requires and the duration for which it is required. The entrepreneur will need money to buy machinery, building, raw materials, etc. There are 2 components here. The first is the fixed component, that is money is spent for buying a building, machinery, equipments, etc., which is called as fixed capital. Then money is spent on buying raw materials, paying wages to laborers, salaries, rent, telephone bills, etc., and this is called as the working capital. The entrepreneur has to arrange money both for the working capital as well as the fixed capital of his business. The finance can be raised by self-contribution or by borrowing from banks or any other financial institutions. Money can also be borrowed from friends and relatives. The next is selection of line of business. The process of launching a business will begin when the entrepreneur starts thinking about the line of business. He can consider business opportunities looking at the market demand. He may go for existing goods or he can go for a new product. But before taking any step, one has to ascertain the profitability of this business and the amount of capital investment that has to be made. The next, the form of organization. The type of the business organization has to be chosen as per the requirements. Normally, a small business enterprise may be preferably be started as a form of sole entrepreneurship or a small partnership. Availability of labor, workforce or employees. An entrepreneur cannot run business all alone. He has to employ people to help him. Skilled and semi-skilled workers have to be recruited particularly for manufacturing. The entrepreneur must find out whether he or she will be able to get the right type of employees for the activities involved. So these were some of the factors that an entrepreneur has to look at before starting a business organization. With this, we have come to the end of this question paper. Hope you liked it and it has been of some use to you. If so, please do share it with your friends who might also find this video beneficial. And thank you for watching.
Thank you for watching this video. If you found this video useful, please do give it a like. Request you to share it with your friends who might also benefit from this video. If you would like to see more such content, please do leave a comment in the comment section below. And please do subscribe to watch more such videos. Thank you again.